The problem is the women want a traditional man, but they don't want to be a traditional woman. Man, not only did he lose a good chunk of his income in a divorce, but at 2 or 3 years old, he's finding out the children aren't even his, but the state still says you must pay child support for children that aren't biologically yours. It's chaos out there, and that's the whole point. If you really wanted a wife and kids, go find a place that the government can't support women. My unofficial name is Joker. I had been married and divorced, and both those divorces went pretty smoothly.
Did you say both divorces? So is that two?
Yes. If an attorney advises a woman to state that he had been harmful, she can get full custody of the children. And if she gets full custody of the children, not only does she get more money from the man, but the government backs up the attorney by giving him extra money.
I'm sure there will be people who will be like confused by me even doing this podcast. They'll be like, hey, Zuby, you're married. Why would you have someone who's like not all super pro marriage?
60 to 70% of women are now identifying as feminist and voting for left-wing things. It's complete societal breakdown on every level. And this is just one portion of it.
What's your goal or motivation in terms of the stuff that you put out there?
A couple of things. Number one, men stop paying for Only Fools content.
What's up, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls around the world? Welcome back to the Real Talk with Zuby podcast. I'm very excited for today's conversation, and I am going to be talking to video creator and overall content creator, and this is Joker. Welcome to the show, man. How you doing?
Thanks. Very, very happy to be here, man. Always wanted to talk to you.
Well, I know who you are, but for my listeners who are not familiar with you and the stuff that you put out there online, please introduce yourself.
My unofficial name, my nom de plume is Joker. A content creator on YouTube, Rumble, and on Locals for a channel called Better Bachelor. And it's been out there for about 5.5 years now, I think, just talking about, initially started about divorce rates and child custody and many of the issues that men had with marriage, divorce, and relationships later on, and then moving into talking about feminism and feminization of society and pushback against men and all the other things that seem to affect guys. So it kind of expanded over the years. And now I basically just keep up on the news and talk about issues I think other guys might want to know about.
Well, I'm curious because I've seen a lot of your stuff out there over the years, but I realized I don't really know much about your own story and how you got into this world. So what was it that led you to wanting to create the videos and put out the material that you do?
I had reached my mid 40s, and I had been married and divorced, and no children, and both those divorces went pretty smoothly. I didn't lose half my assets. I didn't have really any assets at the time. I was still pretty young.
All right, sorry to jump in. Did you say both divorces? So is that two?
Yes, yeah, I did it once. You know, I was raised by a good family. My parents were kind of traditional people, and my father raised me to say, or to be the type of guy to say, hey, if you love a woman, do the right thing. Get married and provide and be a good husband. And I fell in love, or what I thought was love, which wasn't quite the case as you get older and wiser. At 21 years old, that lasted about 6 months until she decided to leave me for a guy with a Ferrari and a much bigger bank account that was about 10 years older than we were. And then the second time I did it, it was to a professor, a biologist, someone that was intelligent. And I missed the warning signs of the feminism and the other things. And she decided she loved work more than me, and that my outlook on relationships and men and child deletion, I guess baby deletion we'll call it, and some other things weren't progressive enough. And she said I wasn't the right guy for her. So things started falling apart there to the point where I eventually left because I realized there's no way I'm going to stay married to this person for the rest of my life. And she had no problems just insulting me and making my life a living hell. So I just decided to pack up and leave. And that was around the age of 35. And then, I just did my own thing and was kind of doing the bachelor thing and casually dating. And it really didn't, I really didn't hit the point where I wanted to start talking about relationships until I had quit my jobs. I'd sold all my earthly possessions, and I filled an 80-liter backpack and then spent the next 15 or 16 months hitchhiking, busing, and hoofing it around Europe and a little bit in Africa, just over into Egypt, just touching the very northern tip there. And then I did Southeast Asia. And when I got to Australia, I think that's when everything started hitting home for me. In Southeast Asia, the women treated men. Now, again, this is from an outsider's view. So, someone living in Southeast Asia, if a Filipino man or a Thai man may disagree with me, but as an outsider going into that culture, the respect and reverence that I was given was surprising. Women were very excited to date you and treat you well and cook for you and kind of be a very traditional woman, even though they knew I wasn't staying. And then the snapback when I landed in Australia, right after I left the Philippines, I went to Australia. I landed in Perth, and I noticed news articles, things that were happening online were very anti-man, very bashing men, bashing the patriarchy, talking about women's strengths and how women are better than men. And it was, I mean, it was such a quick shift in just getting off a plane a few hours later that you say, oh my gosh, this something's really going on. Like they're really coming after men. And then once I got in the United States, you jump on the dating apps and say, well, maybe I'll casually date again. And all of a sudden, everything is completely different in just 18 months. You say, oh my gosh, no one wants to talk to you. You don't get a chance. Even with women that, I mean, I would consider less attractive than I would normally date, even they had attitude, and you say, something's going on here. And that's when I think the latest big push against men and everything else. And then with TikTok and other social media apps, it became very popular to roast men, to make fun of men, to put your demands of, I need a six-figure salary, he needs to be 6 foot. And the culture changed very quickly to women were now promoting how great they were by saying how awful men were and how demanding the woman was, and she needs better than the average guy, trying to, I don't know, it felt like they were trying to make themselves seem more desirable than they were. Everything just kind of went nuts. And I said, I want to talk about this because I'd listened to a few friends and other men out there saying, I'm doing something wrong. This is on me. I was raised to be a good guy. What am I missing? There must be something out there that I need to fix about myself, or that I've done something wrong. My marriage has failed, or the kids got took away, or something that keeps happening where these guys are getting, they're raised by good families, told to do the right thing, and they're doing the right thing, and they're getting cheated on, or they're getting divorced, or they're not getting any dates. And there's a point in time where guys say, it's got to be me, because the red pill wasn't a thing, or the manosphere, all the other terms they have for men's communities now. That wasn't really a thing. There was Tom Likas and a couple other, Rollo Tomasi's another one, that had been doing this for, gosh, a very long time. But a lot of guys didn't know. And I was one of them. I just said, I'm failing as a man. So you get into the pickup artist stuff, and you say, well, maybe this is the key to attract women, how to get women to date me. And after a while, you realize, well, I'm kind of lying. I'm pretending to be somebody I'm not. I'm purporting to be a better man or a different man than I am. Why do I have to do that to get dates or to get interest from women? Something's just not working here. And I think through the very original people that were once on YouTube that have been chased off because it was considered misogynistic and very anti-woman, when in reality it was just men standing up for themselves. And so I listened to a couple of those content creators for a while, and some of them seemed to be too strong, too anti-woman for me. Like, I don't hate women. I just want to figure them out, and I want to try to fix things. And then some of them seemed a little soft, which I think now a lot of people would say I'm probably a little bit soft or softer than I was. And it was just about having conversations and letting guys know that yeah, things are kind of crazy out there, but it's not necessarily your fault. Maybe you can improve a little bit, but the other end of the spectrum has really gone crazy as well.
Man, you've said a lot there. There's so many directions we can go in. I mean, the first thing I want to say is what's so interesting about this topic. I'd say the conversations about just the reality of men and women, gender dynamics, anything to do with hypergamy, marriage, divorce. Why aren't men getting married? Why aren't women getting married? Why aren't people coming? The thing that is strange about this topic is, I think, a couple things. I think number one is that everybody has a stake in it because the most normal thing as human beings, boys and girls, men and women, regardless of your culture, your nationality, your background, just inter, gender relations are important for obvious reasons. People want to mate, people want to marry, people want to have children, and we've got two sexes and they need to get on. This has always been the case for centuries and millennia. So it's interesting because everyone has a stake in it and therefore everyone has an opinion on it. Whether it's a man, a woman, old, young, single, married, divorced, never wants to marry, wants to get married ASAP, currently. Every single person has a stake and an opinion. There aren't that many conversations where everybody can contribute, regardless of their age or level of experience. So I think that's really fascinating. I think another thing that's really interesting is almost everybody has an incentive to not be totally honest, right? Men, women are not going to be totally honest. Men are not going to be totally honest. Whether this is about what they really want, what they're experiencing, what they've experienced in the past, whether positive or negative, what they really think about all these things. Like there's an ego protection going on, and there's also a sort of mating strategy protection going on, right? Like if women were just totally upfront about everything that goes on in their heads and in their emotions, it wouldn't necessarily serve their agenda. Same thing with men. And so it's strange because these conversations go on, but it feels like almost everybody is lying all of the time. When I see these convos going on online, whether it's coming from a more liberal perspective or a more conservative, whether it's coming from men, whether it's coming from women, there's always we can talk about it, but we can't really be totally honest because it's gonna look bad. So something I find interesting about like what you and a small handful of other people do is you kind of just say what you think is true. And when you do that, you're always going to get accusations of hating women or of misogyny, of being a sexist. You're going to get, of course, the who hurt you. You're going to get the, oh, well, if something went wrong, I don't know the details of your past relationships and right? Like relationships are very complicated, but whether it's women or it's men or it's liberal or conservative, they're always going to default with, well, what's interesting is they still always tend to put the accountability on men, right? And someone could argue that you should or you shouldn't, but it's kind of fascinating. There's always a hesitation and an aversion to recognize the female side of the equation. Very few people have a problem with telling men, look, like it's your fault. You need to do better. You need to take responsibility. You need to take accountability. No one has a problem with that. Liberal, conservative, man, woman, no one has a problem with telling men, hey, look, man, you need to man up. You need to do better. But I find people get very, very shy and uneasy if there's ever a conversation of like, okay, well, all that can be true. Let's also talk about the other side of the equation because, women are not these perfect little angels who always, do what's good. And if it weren't for men, there'd be no corruption or whatever. That's just not the reality. So I think we're just kind of at a very interesting space right now culturally where a lot of the trends that you talk about are being noticed and more millions of people are experiencing them to varying degrees. I'm constantly seeing women complaining about men online. I'm constantly seeing men complaining about women. Obviously, I know people in the real world. I have my own experiences and see what other people have been through. And in short, it's quite a mess that has been created, particularly in the modern West. Technology has made it even more complicated. But the seeds of all this stuff were planted, I think, prior to either of us even existing in the world. So what is your sort of read in the decades that you've been living, what's your sort of read on the trajectory of what has happened, particularly and quite uniquely in the West, that has led to this gender chaos where marriage rates are at an all-time low, single, people being single is at an all-time high, childlessness is at an all-time high, and it just seems that neither men or women, whether they're older or younger, overall seem to be so happy with the other sex. What do you think is going on?
Well, I think it depends how deep you want to drill down into it. You can get to the point where you're really stretching for conspiracy that might be backed by a little bit of data, all the way up through just social media and a lot of the writers of articles and people on television have a very pro-feminist left-wing bias. I think, but if you go back and look at things, we'll take it back. A lot of men say, "I want a traditional woman." If you look at things back in the 1940s, 50s, even early 60s, there were men that would get married, have children, and they would leave. They would go start dating the secretary, or they'd leave the family in the lurch. And the mother would be left with kids. She'd be desolate. There wasn't a lot of help for her. So in a good way, they decided to write laws that would allow part of that man's income and his finances to support the woman and the kids, so he couldn't just leave them in a lurch. That was a good thing. But like in many ways, there are people that will game the system. And as you move forward through time and no-fault divorce and other things coming about, women quickly learned that they can actually be at fault in the marriage, either cheating or some sort of infidelity, just deciding to leave, and the man was still on the hook for money. And a story that I talked about 2 or 3 years ago is that attorneys, there's a fund in, and I'm going to get some of this maybe not quite accurate because it's been many years, but there's a fund in the government that is meant to support women getting divorced, and it ties in with the attorneys. I forget exactly how, but the attorneys, there's with this law and funding, that if an attorney advises a woman to state that he had been harmful, either emotionally, physically, or some other way, she can get full custody of the children. And if she gets full custody of the children, not only does she get more money from the man, but the government backs up the attorney by giving him extra money, him or her, extra money, because of this case that they represented somebody that had been hurt by a man. And so now you have women claiming a good guy did something bad just so they can get full custody and therefore get more money from the state and get more money from the man himself. And it's really harming guys when it comes to divorce. And so you've got that portion of it, that we tried to do the right thing to protect women, and it ended up backfiring against men. And now it's to the point where there's been videos that I've done where a man, not only did he lose a good chunk of his income in a divorce, but at 2 or 3 years old, he's finding out the children aren't even his, but the state still says, well, the children recognize you as the father, so you must pay child support for children that aren't biologically yours, that she cheated. And so young men, when they see these stories come out and this travels across the web, and you say, well, if I get married, if I find out the kid isn't mine, I might still have to pay child support. In France and in other sections here in the United States, but France is a country I specifically remember, they made it illegal to do a paternity test on your children unless there's a crime involved, some sort of a crime. So a man can't just say, I want to make sure these kids are mine. You can't do that. It is actually against the law. So men start looking at this and they say, the system that we set up to protect women has been gamed against us. And that was the beginning. That was the things that I started getting worried about and noticing of, hey, don't cohabitate, because some people have to pay alimony because they've lived with a woman for 3 or 4 or 5 years, like in California or other things, and you're recognized as the provider. So you don't get married, you don't cohabitate. You got to be real careful if you have kids. And that's the base of the big worry, where a lot of myself and other content creators got into the red pill. And then what we started noticing, and I use red pill because it's a colloquial term that many people know, whether you want to call it manosphere or whatever, but just started talking about men's issues, we'll just say. And then moving forward, journalists today are overwhelmingly either women or have a left wing bias. They're very in support of women. So the articles come out, men are not as successful in graduating at the same rates, women most affected. Like women can't find enough men to marry that are successful. Instead of focusing on the men that are struggling, they're talking about how the women are struggling because there's not enough good men to go around for women. And you start realizing there's a very strong anti male thread that goes through everything, even in the conservative circles. And so as this comes to light and you realize the media is kind of against you, TV's against you, when's the last time you saw a masculine, intelligent male role model in a family? You don't see those. It's the women that's the smart, creative one, and the guy's the bumbling idiot that she always has to fix. Same thing in commercials. Same thing on social media, that if I came out and said a woman must be all these things, she must be traditional, low body count, she must cook, take care of the children, raise the children at home while I make the money, well, I'm called backward thinking, old man, fuddy duddy misogynist. But if a woman comes out and says, I want the man to stay home and he must do 50-50 and I make the decisions and he needs, my money's my money and his money's my money and I'm never having kids and we need to do things my way, well, that's just her choice. So it's men's choice, bad. Women's choice, well, good. And when you start seeing this through many things, depending on how crazy you want to go, you can see it in everything or you can see it in just a little bit. And now on TikTok, to kind of bring this all the way up to current times, on TikTok, I can show you thousands of videos where women are saying men are evil, men are awful, men are worthless, men are blah, 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 blah. But if I said the same about women, my account's gone. It's over. And what it's causing is the crazy women's opinions being very loud and vocal for the world to see, and men's opinions silenced. So ironically, it's making men seem like they're not as crazy. And I'm sure there are plenty of men that are just as crazy and have just as crazy opinions, but they're not allowed to be on social media because they're shut down. I'll say it this way. Because women are allowed to say what they want to say and they're not removed from social media, women can go crazy and say some really crazy things and go viral for it. But the men that might be as crazy, that might say as many crazy things, they're not allowed to say it. They're removed from social media. And in the end, there's a lot of crazy women saying crazy things and not many crazy guys saying anything because they're not allowed to, because they're removed from the social media. So ultimately, it ends up making women look like the ones that have lost their minds.
It's so odd. I mean, I resonate with what you're saying. We both, you probably spend more time online than I do because you make a lot of videos, but the sort of impact of technology and this communication medium, it's been such a double-edged sword because, something I find interesting in the modern times we live in is that there is a narrative. I feel like regardless of what demographic you're in, there is a negative that the system or the bias or the society in general is against you. So everything you're saying makes sense to me, and I'm sure I've seen many of the same videos, and I'm very hyper aware of lots of these dynamics that are going on, and the double and the triple standards and so on. And I can talk to a woman, maybe of a more feminist persuasion, which is the majority in the West, and they will talk about how the world is a patriarchy and men have privilege and marriage even advantages men more than it does women, and so on and so forth. They'll have all these examples, even sometimes with data, talking about how obviously it's better to be a man than it is to be a woman in the UK, even in the USA and Canada, in like countries where it's, you could say it's easily the best places in the world to be a woman, but they feel like they're oppressed. They feel like the system is against them. Men have the advantages and so on. Then I can talk to men who are more, let's say, red pill leaning, let alone, black pill or MGTOW or just whatever, they see some of this stuff going on. and they kind of feel the other way. They feel, hey, it's, men who are discriminated against. You see the same thing, by the way, on racial lines. I can talk to, some black people and they're like, oh my gosh, there's all this anti-black racism and they're worried about white supremacy and this and that. And they're talking about the systems disadvantage them. And then I also know white guys who are like, no, no, the system is racist and sexist against white guys, right? Like it's the worst time to be a white guy. And they have, and each of these narratives in its own little framing and context, I get what they mean. Like I can understand how, regardless of like which one of these groups you fit into, you can adopt a worldview where it's like, okay, yeah, these things disadvantage me, or it's skewed this way, or it's unfair this way. I guess something I wonder is maybe this is a question like for you personally is what's your goal or motivation in terms of the stuff that you put out there? Is the goal to raise awareness and just wake people up more? Is it to advise or push men in a certain direction? Is it to try to get certain laws and things, say, for example, in the family court, changed ultimately? What is your personal sort of goal? Like when you're making videos or you're putting your stuff out there, um, what would you like to see change?
Well, I don't know if I per se would have any type of goal of changing anything but people's minds, because I'm not really an activist, nor do I have any aspirations to become one. I think mine is a couple of things. Number one, entertainment. We all like to see we all like to see crazy people doing crazy things and make fun of them as a group, a collective. That's just entertainment. So that's part of it. But the other thing too is to make people aware of things. When I was a young guy, I did not know when things went bad, whether it was relationships or you get cheated on or you get hurt, you get divorced, you get broken up with, all the things that can happen to somebody. There's a part of, I think, male responsibility is taking ownership of it. We it's never a healthy thing to walk around saying, "Oh, I'm such a victim. Everybody hates me. Everybody's against me." That will not get you anywhere in the world ever. I mean, you might get some free things, you might get some social media clout, but it's not going to get you ahead in life. I want people to get ahead in life. And so rather than maybe wasting time getting married where you can lose half your assets, maybe instead of wasting time in the dating market where things are heavily skewed against you to where you feel like you must wear an expensive outfit and wear a fancy car and hit the gym to be jacked just to get the attention of women. And none of those things are bad things to do if you want attention from women. Obviously, they work. But the idea is you're going to have to find a way to be happy with yourself and the world the way it is. I'm not changing the world. You're not changing the world. The world is what it is. We can vote. We can speak out against it. We can do what we best can to try to change things. But you have to be okay with what's going on. And the best way to do that is to be a happy person for yourself. You can't blame a company that doesn't want to hire you because you're white or you're black. You're not going to change their mind. If they've decided they're in DEI and they're not going to hire me, but they're going to hire you, I can't change that. I can speak out against it, not going to change it. If a company says, well, we're going to only hire white dudes, or as an example, or we're just hiring women, or we're just hiring whatever, members of the LGHD TV community, whatever you want to call it. If they're going to do that, you're not going to change it. And so you can go home and you can be angry and you can stew about it and rage online, but you're no closer to being a better person or a happier person or having a better job. My whole thing is you're going to have to find a way to be a better man on your own. And if that means moving, if it means getting a job that maybe you don't want to do, but it pays very well so you can further yourself down an advancement and get some property or better your financial situation, you have to look for a way to win. And right now we're in a situation for a lot of guys and maybe even for some women. I don't know. I can't speak to that, but it doesn't matter your skin color. It doesn't matter how you identify. It doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman. Right now, everybody thinks there's some part of the system against you. I can't speak for all those groups except for men and specifically white dudes. I can't speak for what it's like to be a black person in the community today. I can read statistics, but that's not firsthand. But what I can tell you is if you want to sit down and cry about things and feel bad about life and everybody's against me, you will lose. Whereas if instead you say, okay, well, despite all these things, I'm going to remain stoic and intelligent and creative. I'm going to look for a way to win for myself, at least. Maybe it's not for a family or the house on the hill with the picket fence and the wife and kids. Even if you don't do that, look for a way that you can win. And for that, it's different for everybody. You know, a man in the middle of the Philippines is completely different from a guy living in Chicago, is completely different from an English farmer. But if you're smart enough to say, okay, here's my situation, here's the society around me, here's what's going on with corporations and the media and all these other things, how am I going to win? Well, once you figure that out and you implement it, you're on the right track. So the big thing over time, it was notifying people what's going on. And now a lot of what I do is entertainment. But the big thing I want people to do is figure out a way to win, because you're not going to change the world around you. It's going to, you can protest, you can vote, you can do whatever to make small changes, but it is a very giant cruise ship that just turns in very slight degrees. So the best way to win is stop worrying about everybody else, get your situation together, and then you don't care about what's going on with everybody else once you're in a good enough position. And so over time, that's kind of how I've taken my channel. And I get pushback. A lot of people, young people today especially, say, you don't understand the work market. You don't understand this, that, or the other thing. You just don't understand. You're Gen X, you're 52. You don't know how it is. They're right. But I can tell you one thing that's universal is if men could go off in World War II and lose body parts and come back to a society where things are bad, well, I mean, you survived a war. That's worse than anybody's going through. Well, many of us are going through. I'm not at war. I haven't lost a limb. You know, I have fresh, clean drinking water. I take a hot shower. I have a roof over my head. I live better than a lot of people out in the world. So stop coming at this from woe is me and start doing it. Start getting it done. Go out and make it happen. That's what I'm doing now.
I hear that. Something that's also universal, regardless of men, women, culture, nationality, and so on, is that, you know, regardless of some of the problems that may have always existed and some of the unique problems that exist in our modern, strange time, the vast majority of people do want to get married, and the vast majority of people do want to have children and families. So I don't know if you're, you know, you consider yourself someone who like gives advice per se. But if you're interacting with online or offline, say a young man in this situation, let's say a young American man, because you've been in that position, who's like, look, I get some of these issues. I agree with you that, you know, modern dating is crazy and these dating apps kind of suck and they're not so good for men. And there's all this weird toxic feminism going on and blah, blah, blah. Like, I recognize all that. But hey, like, ultimately, like, I want to have a good woman and I want to have offspring. I want to raise a family. Because given that is most people, what do you, I don't know if the right question is what would you recommend or what would you advise, but what are your thoughts on someone who's in that position? Let's say yourself, back when you were 20 years old even, or maybe even in your 30s when you're just kind of in that position and it's like, hey, like I want to do the normal thing. I want to do what my parents did, what my grandparents did, what my ancestors did. What would be your words of guidance or advice for them, given your own personal experiences and just all the things that you see?
Well, I have a hot button on my sound bar that I play quite often. It's from the movie Bone Tomahawk. I don't know if you've ever seen it. I'll press it here.
Smart men don't get married.
Smart men don't get married. Right now, with the way the laws that are very punitive against men, you know, women can go in and say, hey, he did something bad to me, even though there's no evidence, and he can lose custody. He can, you know, he has to pay alimony. He can lose access to his children. In some areas, there's still, husband has to pay an ex-wife for X amount of years, depending on how much money he made. And look at the case of Dave Foley when he was being interviewed by Joe Rogan. This is a guy that was he did the he did a sitcom, news radio, and at the time he was making great money. When he got divorced, he was expected to pay that same money over the rest of his children's lives, even though he became unemployed. He was still expected to pay several $100,000 a month in child support. Well, because of it, he can never go back to Canada. He had to flee. So when things are so punishing on men, it's here, at least in the West. And when I speak of the West, maybe things are slightly different in England or Australia, Germany, whatever. But my usual explanation would be, go east, young man. Go to Southeast Asia. Whether it's now, I'm going to have a lot of people say that won't work either. I get that, but in a world the way it is now, you have to start looking for like a conservative place like Poland. And right now the Poland men are screaming, it's no different here. Or you go to Southeast Asia. Because when I do these videos and I say, well, here's where you might have a chance, I get a lot of guys in those countries saying, nope, it's no different here. But as an American, what I experienced in Southeast Asia was pretty good. Now, maybe that's the color of my skin. Maybe it's the money I made. Who knows? I don't know. But I would say go to Southeast Asia, at least if you get to rural areas of Southeast Asia, whether it's Vietnam or Cambodia or Thailand or maybe the Philippines, things like that, and you stay there. Because the laws there are not so anti-man when it comes to divorce. I mean, in the Philippines, I think divorce is much, much different. I don't even know what the laws are like.
It's pretty much illegal. It's very
right,
it's very
right.
hard to come by there.
Now that doesn't mean she turns into an absolute monster that you wish you could divorce, but the point is, in the West, it has become almost popular to hate men. And not, I'm not talking about all women, all things, but if you spend time online, and if you listen to many of the articles that are written at the New York Post or the New York Times or whatever, there is that vein of, the patriarchy and men do this and white men do that. And I don't want to overblow it. Like if you turn off your computer, it is not in your life unless you're in a major city. It's not in your life. You touch grass. I would not even know about it if I didn't turn on my computer. So it's not pervasive in everything in the world today. But if you spend any amount of time online, you can get inundated, and it does give you, a worldview that everybody is anti-man. But when you do look at the court systems and you do look at dating apps and dating statistics, and you do look at women on social media, on TikTok and these other things, it's very quickly to feel anti-man. And so because of the laws specifically and the other things that lead up to it, guys just say, it's kind of a bad deal to get married and have children here in the West. So maybe that means you look at South America. Maybe that means you look at Southeast Asia. Maybe it means you look at other places where men are still respected. And men, not the government. Government doesn't have a lot of handouts in Thailand. You're not going to be able to have 7 kids, and the Thai are paying you crap ton of money so you can just be a full-time stay-at-home mom. They don't have the government backing, so you need men to provide the finances, the money, and other things. So me personally, I guess I'd say if you really wanted a wife and kids, go find a place that the government can't support women, that women need a man to support women, and then go there, find that right woman, vet them the way you would, make sure you have all the other things in common you want, marry them, and then stay there, because at least that woman will need you as a man and will appreciate the hard work you do, versus here, which is when they get bored of it, they can just divorce you, get part of your money, and then the state will pay the rest. What do they need a man for at that point? I think that's a lot of the ways myself and others look at it now in the West.
Man, what you're saying is so interesting, because I totally get where you're coming from. I don't think like I'm certainly not as let's say black-pilled on the subject, but I would say I am hyper aware and conscious of where this perspective comes from and willing to talk about it, because I find that a lot of people on the more conservative side, maybe it's because of maybe it's because the sort of idea of religious marriage and legal marriage gets so conflated because they use the same word. Again, maybe it's because of what I was saying earlier about people having a stake and an investment, both individually but also societally. I mean, people are worried about birth rates and worried about marriage rates and all of this stuff. So I can understand why people feel quite threatened actually by having guys out there saying, hey, like, don't get married. Marriage isn't worth it. Or even saying to people, hey, like if you're in the US or Canada, get out of there and go to Central America, South America, Eastern Europe, or so on. Like I can understand why a lot of American conservatives would like sort of bristle at that and, want to put it all down to, I don't know, just you silly red pill bros, or you're just losers, or just blah, blah, blah. And it's just not very conducive to anything because I feel like there's just a lot of virtue signaling going on nonstop. And funnily enough, there's a lack of genuine empathy of people really trying to understand things and see things from other people's perspectives. I think there's a lot of, well, I'm all right, Jack mentality. Like, I think a lot of people have, if you're a guy who's been, I don't know, let's say you've been married for 10 years and you've got 3 kids and you have got a nice wife and a nice life and all that, then, there's the mentality of just like, well, it's fine for me and it's fine for most people I know. So what are you even complaining about? I think there's a lot of that going on.
Let me interject just while you're on this specific point. Are you familiar with Steven Crowder, YouTuber?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I know him.
For those that don't know him, he's a very conservative man, speaks a lot about his religion, his faith. He tore up and down red pill guys going their own way, the MGTOW community, all this stuff. He called us losers. And when I say us, I don't necessarily mean I'm of this. The thing that's interesting about this community is we're not all the same. We get lumped in together, but there are guys that are very vastly different opinion, but it's more of a philosophy, not a movement. If I can be, it's not a club. It's just a philosophy. But he railed against that type of community. And he said, you need to change these things about you. And he did multiple videos on the topic until he got divorced. And then when he got divorced, he said, oh my gosh, she changed. She said things that weren't true. She publicly smeared him. And all of a sudden he said, I get it. I get where you're coming from. So it's not to say that we're necessarily right, but when you feel like you've played the game in a fair manner and you lose so badly that it may affect your life for the next 10 to 20 years, that will permanently change you. And so I think it's one of those situations where, if you talk to the very popular conservatives that are all over the place, whether it's, the Daily Wire guys, Ben Shapiro, Matt Walsh, Michael Knowles, that's a good one because many people know of them. But if you talk to those conservatives, they will tell you that we're weird and we don't know what's going on and we must secretly harbor something against women or something else. Steven Crowder used to talk that same way until he got raked over the coals. The guys that join this community or follow this philosophy, I think, and maybe more specifically, join communities like mine where we discuss these things, they either are kind of follow a few normal situations. They're a guy that felt they did everything right. Maybe they didn't, but they felt they did the best they could, and they were completely destroyed in a divorce. They feel like they try to do their best. They're not that selective, but they can't even date. When I was a young man, the high schooler that was a little overweight and kind of a nerd ended up dating a female girl that was a little overweight and kind of a nerd. Everybody found their somebody. Today, that's changed a lot because of the access and availability of online dating apps, the hookups culture and everything else. So there's people that just feel like the system's not working for me. I felt like I did everything right, and I feel like the system didn't work for me. Those are the people that tend to gravitate towards more open-minded listening to these things. And again, yes, some of them may hate women because of the stage they're at their life. They just got divorced or cheated on or something bad happened, and they may have some hate in their heart. But eventually that hate does fade, and it normally turns into apathy. It just boils away to what's the point? Like, I got raked over the coals. Women are showing up and they've been sleeping with guys, hooking up culture for a decade. They show up I wanted a woman that's chaste and pure. And this is an extreme view. I realize that. But they just say, I want somebody to experience life with. I don't want them to go have their fun and party it up and show up. And then I'm supposed to be the provider during the last half of their lives. She's already got kids or whatever. There's so many little chunks of different experiences that everybody has. And much of it is very negative. Even on the women's side, women are very negative when it comes to dating because, maybe they get caught up in dating good looking guys that only sleep with them and they lie and the guy's bound.
Lots of them are dating the same men.
For sure. And so when all of this happens, there's just a breakdown in relationships. And I don't know how we fix this unless we can say men stop paying for only fools content and, men better themselves and women stay chaste and pure. But none of that's happening. So until it does, all you're doing is it's like there's a deep wound in relationships all over the world. And it seems the only thing people are doing is adding infections to it, like making it worse by not recognizing what's going on and not doing something about it. And most of the guys that kind of listen to my content or listen to similar content and adopt this worldview is I'm just not going to participate anymore. It's too messed up. It's too broken. And so that's why fertility rates are going down and marriage rates are going down and divorce rates are going down and nobody's participating anymore. And it's very sad. But I don't know of anybody that knows how to fix it other than pedantic, silly advice that doesn't get you anywhere and ultimately only seems to hurt people. So I mention this because, yes, you're right. Things are awful. And maybe the advice isn't go overseas and find another woman. But if you look at the statistics, whether it's marriage, divorce, child custody, if you look statistically, it's a coin toss at best. Are you willing to risk maybe child support for 20 years? Are you willing to risk maybe alimony for who knows how long? Are you willing to risk losing your house on a coin toss for kids and a family? Some guys are going to say yes, but a lot of guys today say no. It's 50-50. No, thanks. I'm not taking a sip of that poison bottle. And I just represent the 50% that are saying the risk is too much for the prize at the end. Because if the prize at the end was a conservative, for some people, mind you, for some people, a conservative traditional woman or a woman that didn't believe in divorce, that would work through the problems, or a woman that maybe only had a couple of relationships before she got to you, before she's got the damage of breakup after breakup after breakup after breakup. If those women were the prize, guys would say, yeah, maybe I'll take that coin toss. But today, when it's touted that it's great to go out and sleep with a bunch of men to figure out who you want, and it's great to be the boss bitch, the boss bee, and lead the household and control the finances and stunning and brave and yay feminism. I mean, 60 to 70% of women are now identifying as feminist and voting for left-wing things, deleting their babies and all that. The two just aren't going to meet. And so all guys are making is a risk assessment. It's just a risk reward. Is the reward worth the risk? And the reward right now is not great in a lot of men's opinions, and the risk is too high in a lot of men's opinions. The only way to avoid that, in my opinion, is to find a very small town, a very conservative area where, there's not a lot of industry and the guy can still be the provider, or go overseas. And maybe people look at that as crazy, but I haven't heard any answers from anybody else that seems to be better.
Man, you've said so much there, and I'm in a really unique position because all of the people you've named, I know and have had conversations with. So all those people at the Daily Wire, Stephen Crowder, yourself. I think I'm one of the only people who will speak to people on both sides of these things, right? So I've had Rollo Tomasi on my podcast multiple times. I've been on Fresh and Fit a bunch of times. I'll chat to people like yourself, and then I'll chat to a Ben Shapiro. And so I get both if you want to call them both sides of this, it's not really both sides because there are more than two. And I really like empathize with and understand the different positions. Like I'm not, you're never going to hear me chastising a man who's like, you know what, I don't want to get married. Like I don't think it's worth it. You're never going to hear me attacking that man or calling him a coward or whatever because like I actually understand his position. I do also understand people who are particularly more like religious conservatives who are like, man, like marriage is absolute bedrock of foundation. Marriage is super important. It's the best situation for families to grow up. Even most secular people would agree with that. I mean, you kind of have to, and it's worth the risk and so on. There's so many factors that are at play that I just think it's this very tangled web. And like I said from the very beginning, because people have such a stake in it, like you can't be a married man and be like talking about how, oh, marriage isn't worth the risk, or like it's incongruent, right? And so I think part of the problem is there's this fear of even having the conversations or kind of speaking openly because it can be made to sound as if, I'm sure there will be people who will be like confused by me even doing this podcast. They'll be like, hey, Zuby, you're married. You've got a kid, like you're recently married and you have like, why would you have someone who's like not all super pro marriage on the podcast? It's dangerous to hear that perspective. I'm like, no, like everybody's an adult. I think it's important for people to have information and to have different perspectives. I'm totally of the idea, like I think it's very silly for a young man to just be sort of like have a totally blue pill worldview and to just kind of dive headfirst into, getting married and having kids and doing everything, quite quote unquote by the book, and having like no awareness of what the potential risks are, or knowing how to vet a woman properly, or knowing and I don't think he should know all that stuff, sort of for any sort of like negative or evil reason. I just think like, hey, if you're going to do something in the same way, like, look, if you were going to invest money, if you were going to buy a car, if you were going to start a company, you're going to do due diligence. You're going to look at the contracts. You're going to look at what you're signing up for. Okay, like, how do I succeed? What are the things that go wrong? Why did things go wrong for some other people, right? I don't think it's just, I think looking at sort of raw divorce statistics, it doesn't really tell you that much, right? I think it's like, okay, well, what actually happened? What are the reasons for this? What are the things that I can do that will make this far less likely? Before you said something about 50-50 and a coin toss. And the truth is, on an individual level, that's not what it is. I mean, there are some people, single people right now where it's like, if they get married, it's like 95-5. There's other people where it's 5-95. There are some people who I look at and I'm like, you shouldn't get married because there's like almost a 100% chance like it's not going to work. There's men like that. There's women like that. There are men who just like cannot stay committed to one woman. And I have no interest in like pushing that guy into like tying the knot for what? Like you're not even wired that way. There are some women who are so broken and they have such a messed up worldview or whatever that like what are they even gonna get married for, right? Just so they can take some pictures for Instagram or whatever. Like, and I wouldn't advise any man to marry that kind of woman. I'd be like, bro, like you're better off either find another woman or like you'd quite literally be better off just being single than diving into that, because all you're doing is setting yourself up for trouble. And I think these are the nuances that kind of get missed. I think it tends to fall into like pro-marriage and anti-marriage, right? And people think either you're just pro-marriage or you're like against marriage. And I'm like, no, I quite literally think there's a minority of people who like just have no business getting married. It doesn't even matter who they marry. They're just not, they're not the type of man, they're not the type of woman who is going to be able to do that. And then I think there are other things where it's like, look, you marry one person. So the nuance is about the other person and the relationship. I'm not a fan of like just pushing people, hey, just like, it kind of, I don't know. I see some people almost like pushing kind of like, well, just marry whoever and make it work. And I'm like, that's not good. That's not good advice. Like, it's not good advice for a woman. It's not good advice for a man. And when you bring children into the picture, boy, you're not just complicating things in one dimensional. For the rest of your life, you're making things far more complicated and far more challenging. And that can be hugely rewarding. And that's why quite literally billions of people throughout history have taken that risk and gone and done it. Um, but I think people are deceiving themselves if they believe that there's any option with zero risk. I don't think there's any option with zero risk. I think there's also a risk to remaining single in many ways, in multiple ways. And I say that also, and then I also, just last point I'll make is I think a big problem that happens, like I said, is the conflation of what the word marriage even means. So if you are a Christian, if you're a Muslim, if you're Orthodox Jewish, if you're someone of like of a strong faith, then the way you view marriage, what the word marriage even means to you, compared to what it means to someone who's talking purely from the secular and legalistic perspective, you're not even talking about the same thing. You're quite literally talking about two different things, but because they use the same word, people kind of conflate them. So if a guy says, "Hey, I don't think that legal marriage is a good deal," or "I think that, the courts and the laws are not set up in a fair way," there will be people who think he's like attacking the religious institution of marriage, actually, when he's not. He's not even speaking that language. And I just find it kind of, in the same way people kind of change the definition of feminism when it suits them. So sometimes it'll be like, "Oh, I just think men and women should be treated fairly and equally." But then 2 seconds later, it means that, women are better and it's almost like a female supremacy movement and men suck and so on. It's like, well, pick your definition, because if you're going by the first definition, then most modern people are going to fall into, feminists, whether they're men or women. But most people wouldn't consider themselves actively feminists because they're not part of that ideology. They don't hold those beliefs. They're not activists for this cause. So I don't know. It's complex, but I'm curious to hear what you think about some of the things I've said there.
Well, I think there's no problems in dating a woman. I think there's no problems in falling in love with a woman. If you live in the right area and the law cannot punish you, I think there's no problems with living with a woman if that's what you want. And if you want to make an announcement before your deity, whether it's God or whatever particular thing you believe in, and say, we're going to be together forever, and we're going to do X, Y, Z. I think that's wonderful, great, so long as the law can't punish you. It's really boils down to most of the guys going their own way and doing their own thing. They're worried about the financial repercussions of what the law can do to you. There's a lot of guys that have been run through the ringer for a lot of money and a lot of their future for children they weren't even allowed to see anymore. So I think it's more about self-preservation than and how, again, how am I going to navigate the world ahead of me, more so than a disregard for women or family or any other thing. The other thing too is that if you look at most recently, you've probably seen an uptick of men wanting trad wives or traditional women, or that trad thing is coming back around, more popular than in the past. And some of the content I've done, and I don't know what others have done because my time is limited to see what other content creators talk about. But one of the things that we talk about is, as you've said, well, what about the guys that want to get married? Well, and want to have families, and the Ben Shapiro's of the world, and the Matt Walsh is talking about just find a woman. What men are realizing now, and I've done the statistics on my channel, I've talked about it for years, is men are seeing, that 5% that should, or the 95% that should get married, and the 5% that shouldn't. And like you were mentioning, is that the statistics are out that if a woman has a body count of 0, the odds of you staying married are 95, 98% if she slept with one person or 0 people before you. That's why marriages were a lot more successful back in the day. And this is using modern numbers, not going back to 1970. Once she goes up to the first partner, 10%. Second partner, 20, third partner, 30%. And then from there on out, it's 30%. So this is why men are saying, I want a traditional low body count woman, because the odds of me staying married are better. The odds of the child being mine are better. It just improves your chances. So and staying at home, she's not flirting at some guy at work. What do they call it? The work hubby or the work. Yeah. You don't have that risk. She's not, oh, I'm working late tonight. She's going to the gym. And the same thing the other way around. Same thing for the men. That women are saying, you know what, if he's at work all day, and he's supporting the family, she doesn't have as many worries. And so that's why men are starting to say, I want a traditional woman, not one showing up at my door ready to get married at 32, already has a kid or has already, because there's too many issues. And maybe there's the equal. Maybe women say the same thing about men. I don't know. I'm not a woman. I don't listen to their issues. But at least from men are saying, I've got to minimize the risk to make this work well for me. I'm pretty sure Matt Walsh and maybe the others at the Daily Wire, I'm pretty sure they were married young and probably the first in each other's lives for many things. Well, statistically, that's going to work a lot better for you. But what do you tell the guy that's 28 or 30, that's out in the real world? He's not overly religious. He's not, a high school sweetheart with somebody. He's got what's in the market today. And what's in the market today, 70% of it's on dating apps. 70% of it has all the choice in the world. What are the odds she's going to choose you? What are the odds you're going to get on a date with her? What are the odds she's not going to have issues? What are the odds she's not a feminist? What are the odds? And by the time you do the math, you start realizing you're looking for a needle in a needle stack. It's one needle that you're trying to pick out of all the other needles. It's very hard to find. It's very rare. And it's going to be really painful to find it. And a lot of guys just look at that and they just say, nope, not for me.
Yeah, man, I do get that. At the same time, it's like, because of these factors, if you are a guy who does like have his ish together, um, boy, you've got a lot of options. Like there are a lot of options, and I know that people are probably get tired of hearing the men just need to step up, and men just need to man up, and men just need to be better advice. But it can be trite, and it can also be true in the same way that women probably don't like hearing the advice of just like, hey, actually, like, don't slut it up, don't like, don't be a hardcore raging feminist, like, just be decent to men. Like, I
Let
don't
me
know.
interject.
Go ahead.
One quick thing. You're 5'6".
Mm-hmm.
You're bald.
Mm-hmm.
You're slightly overweight. You make 50 grand a year.
Yep.
You're gonna tell me you got a shot?
Well, being slightly overweight is very easy to fix.
Sure, granted.
Okay,
But
and earning more than 50K. Look, let's be real. Like, when I'm offline, I know all the online memes. Like, when
Sure.
it comes to modern day dating. When I'm in the real world, which is most of the time, and I travel a lot. I travel a lot around the world. I see like just normal people coupled up with kids all of the time. Like, whether I'm in the US, whether I'm in the UK, I'm in the Middle East, I'm in Central America. Like, I just see normal everyday couples all the time. Like, the man is not incredibly impressive, the woman's not incredibly beautiful, whatever. They're just like normal people, and they tend to sort of find their level. I fully agree that I think it's always been the case historically that women are and probably should be more picky than men are. I totally agree that a lot of modern women are absolutely delusional when it comes to their own sort of value and the type of men that they're likely to couple up with. Like, hypergamy is very, very real, and traditionally, historically, there have always been things to check for all this. What's fascinating about what we're discussing now is the solutions have always existed, and there's a reason why it was always typically encouraged for people, both men and women, to couple up young and stay pure, get married, have your kids, do it all that way. Whereas that's all just been exploded, right, in the modern West through liberalism and feminism and free love and birth control and all of these things. It's just like it's become more of a free market. And the truth is, when you have like a sexual dating free market, it's not going to be some like egalitarian thing. There's going to be like a small pool of men who tons of, like, gosh, look at dating apps if you want the extreme of this, right? Who are able to get, literally hundreds, thousands of women if they want to. And then you're going to have what's fascinating about the modern time is it's actually shifting back towards a more polygamous style of coupling, where despite polygamy being illegal in the West, there's sort of this like unofficial version of it, which has become the norm, whether or not people are aware of it. So you can have like 10 women literally all dating the same guy, being mad that he won't commit to them. And then you can have a large chunk of men, it could be 30%, it could be 40%, who are almost entirely checked out of the dating market. And then you've kind of got the remaining ones doing something, normal-ish. And it screws everything up. It's not good for women. It's not good for men. It's not good for family formation. Even if those people do go on and get married and have families, as you already discussed, it reduces the probability that those relationships are going to hold together. And, again, as tedious as it may sound, funnily enough, the solution to all of this is actually going back to a truly conservative model, and not encouraging just this free for all, and encouraging, just go out there and sleep with everybody you want. And then, when you get bored of it, or when you finally want to quote unquote settle down, there's going to be some perfect person waiting for you. It's certainly not true for women. I also don't really think it's true for most men. Maybe if you're like a super elite guy, but it's not like the average 40-year-old guy has got like some amazing smorgasbord of beautiful young women that, he can date and who would want to marry him. Like that's just not the reality. So, man, I don't know. I don't know. I guess the reason why all of this matters ultimately is because of, if we come back to what it's really about. I mean, if we think of family formation and we think of children, because most men want to have children, most women want to have children, and the best way to have and to raise children, as we all know, whether you want to just look at common sense or you want to look at actual statistics, it's within, a nuclear family dynamic with some outside support. And that's what most people still want. That's what most people still strive for. So if that is cratering, then we have all of the downstream problems that result from it. And I think that's obviously ultimately why people have such a stake in it.
I might invite you, not now, but at some time at your leisure, go look at how many women don't want kids to save the planet, and look at how many women don't want kids because it'll interrupt their career, and go look at how many women want kids but don't want a husband. They don't necessarily feel the man is important. That when you start digging into statistics like that, what you'll find, and I don't mean to just put it on the women. I'm not trying to say this is a women bad type of thing, but what you're finding is that it doesn't take many 10% to equal up to 100%. It only takes 10 of them, right? So when you've got 10% of women do this, 10% of men do this, 10%, 10%, 10%. So when you've got 10% of women want this and 10% of men want this, and when you start adding these all up together, like you say, the vast majority of women want families. Do they? Do they want it with a husband? Do they want it with the same husband? Do they want, or are they willing to just have a baby with any dude because they can rely on the state for the pay? How much is the man involved in that? So when you start looking at what percent of women delete their kids, what percent of women do this, you add up all those, and then you look at the percentage of what men are the bottom 20 or 30% that are giving no opportunity to date. What percentage of men are now unwilling to be in that middle ground where they maybe can date a middle ground woman at some point, but he doesn't like the fact that she's had way many partners, or that now she's in her 30s wanting to, when it's chaos out there. And that's the whole point, is that it's not that it's necessarily worse for women or worse for men, or the point is nobody's on the same talking points. We don't have an agreement of what a woman is in society today between many of these people. How do you have an agreement of what a good family is, or what is a right amount of dating to do before getting married, or what is the right way to raise children? If we're having arguments over what is a man, what is a woman, how do you how do you find the middle ground where enough of this is successful that it works? And if you wonder about, the repopulation and the fertility rates dropping off the cliff, well, go look at them. Go, and if you look at all the countries, it's that where it's falling off a cliff, it's all westernized, it's all modernized, it's all women in the workforce, and it's feminism. Now, I'm not saying exclusively, but I'm saying this all started with women wanting to be their own providers, and the state can take up the slack, and men aren't necessary anymore. And when you get to the point where men aren't necessary, why you're not worried about them for kids, you're not worried about them for marriage, you're not worried about them for protection, you're not worried about them for anything. Well, then what do you need men for? And so women today that are saying, well, we don't need no man, they're right. I could say many reasons why I think they're wrong, but when it comes to needing a guy, they can find somebody to get them pregnant. They can find somebody to help support the family unit, whether it's the government or their own paycheck, or they don't need protection. They got cops. They've got military. What are men necessary for in the eyes of a woman today? And until we can answer that with a laundry list of things, then I think that's going to be the beginning of your issues. We've made men not necessary anymore. And when they're not, then women are kind of right when they say, we don't need no man. We've got the state and everybody else to cover the slack. How does a man come back from that?
Man, do you know what I think ultimately this leads to? I just think religious people inherit the world. Honestly, when I look at the rampant leftism and secularism and feminism, all of these isms that have resulted from mass secularization, it craters birth rates, it craters formation, it craters marriages, and it, ultimately, whether you're looking at the Amish or strong Christians, whether they're Orthodox or Catholic or Protestant, or you're looking at the Muslim community, obviously, like, the birth rate is not an issue within these communities. Family formation is not such an issue. So I think it's one of those things where on a long enough time scale, it just naturally ends up resolving itself, because so many men and women are just, dropping out, whether voluntarily or seemingly involuntarily. And ultimately, the future will go to people who show up for it. And I don't necessarily, I mean, I'm a Christian myself. So, but, I care more about just, I care more about society and culture beyond people who necessarily share my religious beliefs. But I also just think that these are the inevitable consequences of a lot of decisions that were mostly made before I even was born. If you look at lots of the things that happened in the 60s, from the birth control pill to the rise in hookup culture, you talked about no-fault divorce, all these type of things, which ultimately to me are just a massive attack on the family. They're an attack on tradition, and they're an attack on the family. And they're not ultimately good for women. They're not ultimately good for men. They're not good for children, certainly not good for babies, gosh. But I do think that it ends up just naturally being course correcting in the long term, So I don't even need to look up the statistics of the amount of women and even some men who are saying, oh, I don't want to have kids because of the planet or environmentalism, or it's just too expensive, or this or that, or the patriarchy or feminism. And I'm like, okay, I hear you. But you're also at that point voluntarily, like, you're taking yourself out of the gene pool, to put it crudely, and those values do not propagate themselves. So, regardless of someone's views on my religion or other ones, that's what's going to survive into the future. So I don't know. I would rather than not that not so many millions of people make these decisions or sort of feel like they have to. But I don't know. I'll tell you one more issue that I think that always hits my mind when I see these conversations is I think due to the nature of, let's just call it widespread promiscuity, because that's what it is. Um, I think it makes a lot of people delusional, number one. But I also think that what's the best way for me to what's the best way for me to word this? Um, Sorry, my brain's all over the place. I find this such a fascinating conversation. I also just think like people are not being prepared for the future very well. I think society is constantly lying to young women. I think society is constantly lying to and confusing young men. I think there's part of the issue that's happening in our countries, in my opinion, is they want to have one foot in conservatism and Christian principles and traditionalism and chivalry, and they want to have the other foot firmly in progressivism and feminism and egalitarianism and all of that, and they just don't work. They don't work together. So if they wanted it, right, if people kind of just decided, okay, we're going to just go like full egalitarian, and all of the expectations and all of the responsibility and all of the accountability, all of that should just be 50-50. There shouldn't even be an expectation that a man, pays for the meal or pays for like it's everything's just egalitarian. And we're going to hold women just as accountable as we hold men, and it's all going to be 50-50. That's not my worldview. But it would at least be coherent.
Well, the catch 22 that you have right now is you've got women that are working full time. They've gone to college, they've got their professional degree. They want to have kids someday, and they want to work and make their money. And when you ask them, what do you want from a guy? Well, I'm looking for a traditional guy. He supports the family. He does these things for us. He protects, he provides. And then when that man says, okay, well, I'm a conservative man. I'm apparently the one you want. He says, yes, but you also have to vote for progressivism, and you're fine for all these different leftist ideas, and you should be fine that and so that guy says, but what are you providing me that's traditional? And the guy is attacked. There's a Megyn Kelly, and I forget who the other interview is. Andrew Wilson was talking to Tommy Lauren, I think it was. And he said, okay, you want this conservative man that's traditional, and he's going to support the family, take care of things, and provide and be this man. What are you bringing for that? And the literal answer from quote unquote conservative Tommy Lauren is, what do you mean? What do I bring? You, yeah, you should just want to do this as a good man. Well, as a good woman, shouldn't you just want to raise children and be non-promiscuous and come to me earlier in life rather than sleeping your way through their 30s? And that's where the two don't meet. Is the women want a man to do all the conservative things, but when a man wants her to be conservative or traditional, he's evil and controlling. And then she says, well, I don't want a progressive man that believes in all the things I do because he doesn't want to pay for the dates. And he doesn't want to protect me. He cries when a spider jumps on him. You can't have it both ways. And I think that's the problem is the women want a traditional man, but they don't want to be a traditional woman. And at least from a man's perspective. Now, maybe women can say something else, fine, but you can't have all things. And until we bring the two sides closer together, there's just not a conversation to be had in many cases.
Yeah. I mean, I share I'm very pro. I'm very pro to use the colloquial term now, which people try to sort of use as a bit of a slur. Like I'm very pro, like passport bro. Like I've been in favor of that since before that term existed. Like my entire life, I've always thought that it is like, look, people travel around the world and move city and move country for jobs all the time. People move for various reasons, for jobs, for better weather, for this or that. The idea that it's like somehow ludicrous or silly to move or relocate or travel to have better options in terms of finding a potential wife, mother of your children, and so on and so forth. Like, again, it's just feminist brainwashing that's against that. So, like, I'm very much in favor of it. When young men ask me for my advice, like, if they're, normally it's American men or British men or whatever, and they're complaining, I'm like, bro, like, the world is a big place. And, oh, you know what? I just remembered the point that I was going to make
Mhm.
that I forgot earlier. I think that due to the widespread sort of hookup culture and dating apps and so on, a lot of men and women have this idea that almost like you have to date the entire opposite sex. Whereas I'm
I
like,
disagree.
you need to find one person.
I
So it could.
disagree. Oh,
Oh, wait.
before you go too much
Okay.
further,
Okay. Go ahead.
I hear you.
Go ahead.
It's not a lot of men. It's not a lot of men. A lot of men are not having opportunity in the dating market.
Oh, so,
There's a
okay.
reason why it's called the
I,
80-20 rule, right?
I
It's
think,
a few.
okay. Sorry, man. I think you misunderstand what I'm saying.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Okay. What I'm saying is that even if let's just say you are the most average man in America, you are, I don't know, 5'8", 200 pounds, earning 55K a year. You are Mr. Average. Okay. You need to find. There are at least 3 billion women in the world. You only need to find one. So it could be the case that even in your own country or your own city or even world, it could be the case that 70, 80, 90% of women are not interested in you or they're toxic or they're this or they're that, right? But you only need one, right? You don't need to date, let alone marry 300 women or 500 women and so on. Same with women. Like women, I see women complaining about men all the time, online and offline, right? I exist in the real world. I hear women complaining about men all of the time. And I think a lot of it is because they have this idea of, oh, I need to date 20 guys, 50 guys, 100. It's like you need one. You need to find one who works with you. And then if you can also be a good counterpart to that and your values align, you're good to go. And this is something I just think that historically and in most of the world outside the West, people just understand better. It's just like, okay, I'm an average guy. This is an average woman. Do our values align? Yes. Do we both want children? Yes. Do we want kind of similar things? Maybe we share the same faith or background. Like, okay, cool. Then we can couple together and we can make this work through the hard times, through the bad times. Like, let's commit and let's make this work. Whereas I just think now there's this idea of, well, the general culture, like I agree with you nearly 100% on what the general culture is telling people and what the general culture is saying. And actually, I think that the vast majority of women in the USA are undateable, let alone unmarriageable. I would not consider marrying the majority of women in the USA, even if there were an opportunity, let's say. But I don't need to date them all. I don't need to marry them all. So it could be the case that even like 80% of them are, I'm not even interested. But it's like, okay, out of the remaining, hundreds of thousands or millions, okay, cool. Like you just need to find one. So I think too many people are kind of like checking out or giving up based
Well,
on the trend rather than they themselves actually going out there and trying to individually find a person. I've seen some hideous women who are in happy relationships. I've seen hideous men who
sure.
who are in happy relationships, right? So yeah, maybe you do have to lower your standards. Maybe you're not going to get. Not every man's going to get a supermodel, just like not every woman is going to get, the 6'5" blue eyes trust fund guy. Like if you think you will, you're delusional. So yeah, I just think people need to be a little more realistic, which I know is not popular to say. And people actually need to lower their standards. And maybe people need to. I know the message is never settle, but actually, I think more people probably need to be settling. If you're not going to do the self-improvement,
Oh,
then
sure.
yeah, you've
There,
got to kind
there
of
is
get what's in your. So I guess those are kind of some of my closing thoughts.
I mean, I hear you. There's a large percentage of men, though, that eh, eh, um, there's a large percentage of men that even if they try to improve themselves, are not getting a shot. They just aren't.
How do you know that's true?
Um, well, I hear from across all my videos for the last 5 years. I've heard from probably hundreds of thousands of them.
Hmm.
There are guys that are genuinely, I've heard from guys that are I'm 5'2",
Hmm.
and I've never had a shot at dating. Now, of course, this is my advice: is hey, go to Southeast Asia, back to where I was talking about an hour ago. Your average height, if you're 5'2", 5'3", your average height of at least the women over there, you probably have a better shot. But this goes back to what I was saying in the beginning. We all have different circumstances. You got to find a way that's going to win for you.
Hmm.
We don't all have the same circumstances. So for the 5'2" guy, maybe he goes to Southeast Asia. For the 6'2" athletic guy, all he has to do is open up an app. You have to find your win, and it's different for everybody. And that's the key point that I want to resonate with. If you want to get married, you can get married. If you want kids, you can have those kids. You're just going to have to jump through more hoops the lower on the totem pole you are. And that's why I don't want guys to necessarily give up. But the important thing is that until we bring left right, because the left right is, even centrists are saying the world has gone crazy. If you're in the middle of the aisle and you're like, the world has gone crazy, I don't know what's going on anymore. If you're that guy, that means the left and the right, both sides are crazy. If you're a centrist, you're going to say somebody like I am crazy, and you're going to say a feminist is crazy because you're middle of the aisle. We need to start coming together more cohesively as humankind. And I think with right now, the nice story on social media, it's just like the old newspaper saying, if it bleeds, it leads. Right now, because of the impact of social media and TikTok and all this other stuff, nobody wants to see the feel good video that is just, hey, look at this nice thing that happened. They want the craziness. And as you get more attention for being crazy, the left gets crazier, the right does, feminist does, men do. Politics, everything gets ripped apart to the point you're in tribes. And when you've got men and women and left and right and all these other tribes forming, I mean, we've even got tribes now where it's, I thought it was over. In the 90s, I thought it was over. And then in 2008, the nail in the coffin of the race issue was 70% of Americans voting for Obama. I thought it was over. And now those relationships are worse than they've been since the 1960s between, different races of things. They want us at each other's throats. And when I say they, I mean the people that we should be paying attention to. You can make up your own mind who that is, whether it's the rich people, whether it's the Davos crew, whether it's whoever wants to control us. As long as we're fighting each other, we're not fighting the people that are trying to manipulate and control us and cash out on the whole mess. As long as this is all going on, the dating and the relationship is just a part of it. It's just a subset of it. We just need to keep going bigger and bigger and bigger into what is tearing everything apart. I think once you find what's tearing everything apart and tearing everything down and making us all hate each other for various reasons, when you start finding out what that's about, why it's being done, and we start working from big to small, maybe we get some help. But right now, the relationship thing is small in all things given. I mean, it has a big impact on our future, but I think it's small. We need to start looking at bigger because men are becoming more conservative and voting Republican. Women are Tory or whatever you want to call it, Brexit. What is it now?
Conservative.
Reform.
Oh, reform, yeah.
Over in the UK. You've got men moving more traditional conservative, women moving more left. How do you talk about dating when you can't even agree on the future of society? I think there's just way too much to find a nice, easy fix for this. If you were to ask me really what it is, it's complete societal breakdown on every level. And this is just one portion of it. That's how I feel about all of this stuff now.
Yeah, that's heavy, man. And yeah, man, I largely agree with you. I would perhaps say that I think the intergender relations are actually extremely important. I think if we talk about it just through about dating and stuff like that, then it sounds unimportant. But ultimately, as a species, if men and women are not coupling and are not reproducing, I mean, you look at South Korea for an extreme example of this, then your society is cooked, right? Like you give it enough time, and you don't even have a population anymore. So I think it's
irrelevant. In my opinion, that's irrelevant. The only reason the only reason they're so freaked out about population growth is the Ponzi scheme of Social Security and all these welfare and benefit programs. They're Ponzi schemes. You need more people putting money in than taking out. And so when you have Japan and South Korea becoming aging, they don't have the pensions anymore. They don't have the social benefits anymore because you're on the backside. When you're on the backside and you've got an aging population and everything shrinking, you don't have the funding to do all the giveaways anymore. And so really all it means is as we shrink, if we take away these social programs, it means that Social Security doesn't take care of grandma and grandpa, the kids do. It brings the family unit closer together. That's what they worry about. They don't want men and women getting along. They don't want black and white getting along. They don't want different generations getting along, because a close-knit family unit that cares for itself is strong. They want everybody individual. And when I say they, again, we can talk about all the various
Yeah, no,
they.
it's fine. I know what
But
you mean. The powers that be.
yeah, you know, a family unit has one worker. It's one taxpayer. It's one provider. And they get paid a lot. 5 workers, they all get paid much less. There's 5 people to tax, and they're all more easily they're more malleable. They're more easily fooled. The last thing they want is a family unit. The last thing they want is multiple family units. They don't want community. They don't want black and white getting along, men and women getting along, people getting married, people having faith, people having church, because it's close knit. We don't need the government. We don't even want the government then. But when you tear everything down and make everybody reliant on the state, and you don't have any faith anymore, you don't have trust in your fellow man, you don't have that relationship, you don't have children, what are you living for? Like, why do you care? And so it's just, you know, eat the bugs, give me the food, give me the cubicle, who cares? It really is, when you start looking on a macro, a much larger scale, I think that's really the issue that trickles down into all the hate and the craziness we see in the world today. It's coming from the top. Now, maybe I'm starting to sound like a conspiracy theorist, but when you really look at why is it at the same time? Sorry, I'm going on a complete tangent, but I'll leave this as my kind of closing thoughts. When you look at why are they putting in digital IDs, and why are they trying to control money with digital currency, and why are they trying to do lockdowns like during the pandemic, and why are they trying to make men and women hate each other, and why are they bringing in immigration when they know people are at each other's throats, and then they'll have to bring in a police state to clean everything up. When you start looking at all the individual pieces and chips, and you say, why is this all happening at the same time right now? They're trying to move in for checkmate. The 15-minute cities, controlling where you go. It's all about control. And what they can't control is a family unit and a community that doesn't need the outside world and loves each other and supports each other and wants to be around each other. That community will fight them tooth and nail, and they can't have that. And so they're working for destruction. And so far it's working, and I don't know how we mend it, but it's not at the bottom. It's not figuring out what's going on dating apps and why guys can't get likes and women are all swiping on the top 10%. You don't fix it there. What you do is you start looking at the bigger picture of how are they driving men and women, black, white, poor, rich, how are they driving a wedge and isolating everybody? You figure that out, the rest of it falls into place.
Amen. I resonate with a lot of what you just said. And, you know, I feel like we've come full circle, because ultimately this is why marriage and family formation matters and people have such a stake in it. I totally agree with you that, you know, the stronger the family, then the weaker the state. If they can fracture all of that and just get everyone isolated, then yeah, it becomes easier for the government to just take over everything. Communists in particular were against the family unit for this very reason. So yeah, man, that's why, again, that's why I say, you know, I do think the stakes are high. It might manifest in very silly ways online, but yeah, it does matter. And maybe I feel particularly passionate about this after having my first son being born this year. So I'm like, okay, like I already cared about this stuff, but you know, it gives you this stake in the future, and you're thinking of, okay, what's the world and society that my future children are gonna grow up in? And yeah, you don't want it to be more jacked up than it is already. So exactly. We'll see. But you know, I live in Dubai, and Dubai is as far as the world goes, it's a very sane place. So lots of these things that we're talking about are not they're nowhere near as sort of extreme and disordered there.
Yeah, but well, it's a very if I'm not mistaken, it's still pretty patriarchal, is it not?
I mean, yeah, I mean, it's all the Gulf countries, UAE, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Oman. I mean, certainly by Western standards, you know, liberal Westerners would bristle at certain things there. But I mean, Dubai is probably like the most liberal city in that region of the world. So it's not like
Would
it's
you call it patriarchal and I mean more so than here, more patriarchal and more authoritarian?
certainly more authoritarian. It's not a democracy, but with that comes like it's one of the safest places in the world and one of the sanest. And there's no taxes. I think it's easily one of the best cities in the world. But you know, different strokes for different folks. I'm not here trying to like shill Dubai to anyone or you know tell people to move. Different people like different things. But for me, and you know, considerations for myself, my family, I could choose to live anywhere in the world. I'm blessed to be able to say that, and yeah, that's where I've chosen for now. So I think it's a good spot. I wouldn't even say it's I just say like you know, it's just normal. Like Dubai is very reminiscent to me of like where I don't know the UK and US were, let's say in the 90s. Like it was just kind of normal, a healthy balance between liberalism and conservatism.
Yeah.
Not like all the way one way or all the way the other. You know, no one there's like transing kids. I've never seen a pride flag ever, like not one, in the whole country. Um, they're not doing all this like insane stuff. They're not trying to like tax everybody to death or bring in gazillions of you know illegal migrants or whatever. There's zero tolerance of crime there. So it's just I don't know. It's just sane. It's just sane, and it's nice to be somewhere sane. So one of my personal solutions for a lot of the crap we've been talking about and a lot of the other things going on is to just make an individual choice to move yourself and your family to somewhere which is just better aligned with your values and where you don't feel like you're swimming upstream against the culture all the time. And in the US, one great thing about it being such a big country is there are so many conservative and sane pockets. So even if you don't want to like leave the country, UK is less like this because it's so much smaller. But in the US, there are so many sane pockets that you know you don't have to live in San Francisco. You don't have to live in Baltimore or Seattle if you want to just be somewhere normal. You've got the option.
And since the states in many cases can overrule the federal
Yeah.
government, if you go to a very conservative area, many times the city holds more sway than the state, and the state holds more sway than the federal government, which is such a brilliant system that you can tuck yourself into a nice conservative county in a conservative pocket, and a lot of the world just passes you by.
Any place you would like people to go and check you out and find you?
You can find me on Rumble, over on Rumble. My channel is called Odd Man Out. It is a duplicate of my YouTube channel, which is Better Bachelor. I just did a rename because, you know, now a lot of what I speak about is less than Bachelor stuff. It's more just the craziness around us. And I definitely feel like an odd man out on many of my opinions. And you can find me on Twitter or X, I guess it is now, at Bachelor Joker.
Awesome, Joker man. It's been great to talk to you. You're one of those guys like I feel like we could just talk for hours and hours on all sorts of different subjects, and it would always be interesting. So thank you for the gift of your time, and I wish you all the best.
Thanks, man. I hope we do it again soon.